Today we're going to be reading a story, read aloud, called Thunder Cake. And this story I'm going to read to you, but I'm going to read it, and as I'm reading it, I'm going to be asking myself some questions while I'm reading the story. So I want you to kind of follow along with me. First of all, when I chose this book, I went to the library and I chose this book. And when I first pulled it off the shelf, I read the title, Thunder Cake. And I thought to myself, I have no idea what a thunder cake is. So the first thing I did is I'm going to kind of use the clues of the picture here, and I'm going to predict what I think is going to happen in the story. So as I'm looking at this story here, I'm thinking, well, let's see, their skirts are kind of blowing forward. So that's telling me when I've been outside in a windstorm, my clothes would blow forward too if the wind was blowing really hard. And then I'm also looking at these clouds up here, and these clouds up here are really dark. And that's telling me maybe a storm is going to come in. And then I see that it kind of looks like maybe in the distance it's raining, because sometimes when I've been at my house, and I've looked out at the storm clouds, I can tell across the valley it is raining. And that's kind of how it looks like in my mind. So I'm thinking thunder cake probably has to do with a storm. But I have no idea what thunder cake means. So in my mind, I'm going to tell myself, I'm going to read and find out exactly what a thunder cake means. Hopefully by the end of the book I'll know. On sultry summer days, the first thing I think in my mind is, I have no clue what sultry means. So I'm going to read on and see if I can figure out what sultry means. On sultry summer days at my grandmother's farm in Michigan, the air gets damp and heavy. Okay, I've read the first sentence. So sultry, I'm thinking, means damp and heavy. So it probably is really humid because that storm's coming. And if you've ever been in a place where it can be really humid, when that storm comes, you can feel it on your skin. Storm clouds drift low over the fields. Birds fly closer to the ground. The clouds grow far for an instant with a sharp crackling light, and then a roaring, low, tumbling sound of thunder makes the windows shudder in their panes. The sound used to scare me when I was little. I loved to go to my grandma's house, babushka. Now for a minute I read babushka and I think, what does babushka mean? So what am I going to do? I'm going to read on and see if I can figure out what that means. Babushka, as I used to call my grandma. Oh, so babushka means? Grandma. And I figured that out by just reading on. But I feared Michigan's summer storms. I feared the sound of thunder more than anything. I always hid under the bed when the storm moved near the farmhouse. This is the story of how my grandma, my babushka, helped me overcome my fear of thunderstorms. Grandma looked at the horizon. Now, I'm not quite sure what a horizon is, so I'm going to use the picture clues to see if I can figure out what horizon means. So I'm looking over here, and Grandma's looking like this at the horizon. So I'm thinking this over here is the horizon. And drew a deep breath and said, "This is thunder cake baking weather, all right? Looks like a storm coming to me." "Child, you come out from under this bed. It's only thunder you're hearing," my grandma said. The air was hot, heavy, and damp, and a loud clap of thunder shook the house, rattled the windows, and made me grab her close. "Steady, child," she cooed. "Unless you let go of me, we won't be able to make a thunder cake today." "Thunder cake?" I stammered as I hugged her even closer. "Don't pay attention to that old thunder, except to see how close the storm is getting. When you see the lightning start coming real slow, when you hear the thunder stop counting, that number is how many miles away the storm is. So one other strategy that I can use is I wasn't quite sure how to figure out how far a thunderstorm is going to be. So I'm going to reread the text to see if I can figure it out. And I'm going to read it a little slower so I can think about what I'm reading and see how I figure out how far a storm is. So I'm going to go back here. Don't pay attention to that old thunder except to see how close the storm is getting. When you see the lightning, start counting. Okay, so when I see the lightning, I start counting. Real slow. When you hear the thunder, stop counting. So in my mind, I look for the lightning, then I count until I hear the thunder. Then that will tell me how far the storm is. That number is how many miles away the storm is. Oh, I see. That's how I can see how far a storm is when it's coming to my house. Understand, she asked? We need to know how far away the storm is, so we have time to make the cake and get it into the oven before the storm comes, or it won't be real thunder cake. Her eyes surveyed the black clouds away off in the distance. Now, this page, I'm not going to stop and talk about some of the words I don't understand. I have copied this page off for you, and you're going to circle words you don't understand and see if you can figure out what these words mean on your own. Her eyes surveyed the black clouds away off in the distance. Then she strode into the kitchen. Her worn hands pulled a thick book from the shelf above the wood stove. "Let's find that recipe, child," she crowed as she lovingly fingered the grease-stained pages to a creased pot. "Here it is, thunder cake." She carefully penned the ingredients on a piece of notepaper. "Now let's gather all the things we'll need," she exclaimed as she scurried towards the back door. We were by the barn door when a huge bolt of lightning flashed, and I started counting like Grandma told me to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then the thunder roared. 10 miles. It's 10 miles away. Grandma said as she looked at the sky. "About an hour away, I'd say. You'll have to hurry, child. Gather them eggs careful like," she said. Eggs for a mean old Nellie Peck hen? I was scared. I knew she would try to peck me. "I'm here. She won't hurt you." "Just get them eggs," Grandma said softly. The lightning flashed again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I counted. 9 miles, Grandma reminded me. Now, when I was reading this book for the first time, it kind of made me visualize and think about a time when I was a kid. My parents have a big porch on their front yard and off their house, and it overlooks the whole Salt Lake Valley. And when we would have storms, we would get blankets and sit on chairs and have hot chocolate, and we would watch these storms. So when I was hearing this little girl counting the storms, I did the same thing as a little girl. Now, what I want you to do with your elbow partner is I want you to talk about what did you visualize in way of a storm when I was reading these 2 pages about the storm coming closer and closer. Now, when I say go, I want you to discuss with your elbow partner. When you're done, put your hand on your head, and that tells me you're ready for me to read them. Ready? Go. I've got a few partners with their hands on their head. That tells me they're ready. Okay, let me have eyes up here. 3, 2, 1. Is there anybody that would like to share what they said or what their elbow partner said about a connection they had where they were visualizing this storm one time? Savannah.
Like each time when the lightning went, she would count to 10, and when the thunder roared, she would stop counting and see how many miles there were, and then she would count again.
Okay, so what was a connection you had?
Oh, I didn't hear you.
Okay, who has a connection that they want to share of a time they were in a storm? Parker?
Okay, so my grandparents own this huge property, and so I have a cabin up there. And sometimes in the fall we get these huge thunderstorms. And so I one time counted, and it was like 20 miles away.
Right, so you've actually used that counting technique. Okay, now we're going to go on and see what happens with this thunder cake. Milk was next, milk from old Kit Cow. As Grandma milked her cow, Kit Cow turned and looked mean right at me. I was scared. She looked so big. Zip went the lightning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I counted. Baroom went the thunder. 8 miles, child, Grandma croaked. Now we have to get chocolate and sugar and flour from the dry shed. Oh, she's going off fast. I was scared as we walked down the path from the farmhouse through Tanglewood Woods to the dry shed. Suddenly, the lightning lit the sky. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I counted. Boom, ba-ba-boom, crashed the thunder. It scared me a lot, but I kept walking with Grandma. Another jagged edge of lightning flashed as I crept into the dry shed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I counted. Crackle, crackle, boom, kaboom, the thunder bellowed. It was dark and I was scared. I'm here, child, Grandma said softly from the doorway. Hurry now, we haven't got much time. We've got everything but the secret ingredient. 3 overripe tomatoes and some strawberries, Grandma whispered as she squinted at the list. I climbed up high on the trellis. The ground looked a long way down. I was scared. I'm here, child, she said. Her voice was steady and soft. You won't fall. I reached 3 luscious tomatoes while she picked strawberries. Lightning again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I counted. Kabang! Baroom! The thunder growled. We hurried back to the house and the warm kitchen, and we measured the ingredients, and I poured them into the mixing bowl like Grandma mixed. I churned butter for the frosting and melted chocolate. Finally, we poured the batter into the cake pans and put them into the oven together. Okay, now I had a connection. I was thinking about a time when I was a little girl, my mom would bake a ton of things around Christmas. And we had tons and tons of neighbors that she would do baking for. And what she would do is we would bake lots of different kinds of sweetbreads and cookies, and then we would freeze them and put them in the freezer. And then when it got closer to Christmas, we would run it out to our neighbors. And I remember having to get all these kinds of ingredients like this grandma and little girl did to get together to make these wonderful, delicious cookies for my neighbors. And I know part of the reason my mom would freeze these cookies is so me and my sisters wouldn't eat them before she had a chance to get them to the neighbors. So it's harder to eat the cookies when they're in the freezer. Lightning lit the kitchen. I only counted to 3, and the thunder rumbled and crashed. 3 miles away, Grandma said, and the cake is in the oven. We made it. We'll have a real thunder cake. So remember at the beginning, I was trying to look at the pictures to see if I could figure out what thunder cake is. By reading this, I have been able to figure out what a thunder cake is. So in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, every time the thunder is cracking or the lightning's going off and the thunder's cracking, they are counting how many miles it is. And they're trying to get all the ingredients together for this cake because they want to have a cake all ready by the time the storm gets there. Isn't that perfect? Sit there and enjoy a cake while the storm is looming around, and maybe you've got lots of lightning and thunder and rain. 3 miles away, Grandma said, and the cake is in the oven. We made it. We'll have a real thunder cake. As we waited for the cake, Grandma looked out the window for a long time. Why, you aren't afraid of thunder. You're too brave, she said as she looked right at me. I'm not brave, Grandma, I said. I was under the bed, remember? But you got out from under it, she answered, and you got the eggs from old Nellie Peck Hen, and you got milk from old Kit Cow. You went through Tinkleweed Woods to the dry shed. You climbed the trellis to the barnyard. From where I sit, only a very brave person could have done all these things. I thought and thought as the storm rumbled close. She was right, I was brave. Brave people can't be afraid of a sound, child, she said as we spread out the tablecloth and set the table. When we were done, we hurried into the kitchen to take the cake out of the oven, and after the cake had cooled, we frosted it. So I'm going to check my prediction. Was I right on my prediction when I thought that there had to be a storm going on in this book?
Yes.
I was able to just use the pictures from the front cover, and I saw the word thunder, so I thought there has to be a storm in this story. And my prediction was right. There's a huge storm coming. Just then the lightning flashed, and this time it lit the whole sky. Even before the last flash had faded, the thunder rolled and boomed and crashed and baroomed just above us. The storm was here. Perfect, Grandma cooed, just perfect. She beamed as she added the last strawberry to the glistening chocolate frosting on top of our thunder cake. And I'm looking at that cake, and I'm thinking of all the times my mom made a delicious cake. It didn't quite look this nice. But I remembering having chocolate cake because my sisters and me and my mom and my dad, we all loved chocolate, so my mom would make chocolate cakes a lot. So that kind of made a connection for me. As rain poured down on our roof, Grandma cut a wedge for each of us, and she poured us steaming cups of tea from the samovar. When the thunder roared above us so hard it shook the windows and rattled the dishes in the cupboards, we just smiled and ate our thunder cake. From that time on, I never feared the voice of thunder again. And there they are, kind of having a little fun together. Okay, I'm going to say a secret word, thunder. When I say that word, I want you to quietly get in your seat and look up at the front door. Ready? Thunder.